Well, welcome everybody. We'll get started. I know that we'll have a few more people entering as we go. My name is Allison Gadik, and I am the immediate past president for CADA. And I am so excited for us tonight to carry on the conversation that we began last year, just about this exact time. And the world has changed a lot in some ways and not at all in other ways. So this conversation is one that continues, and our learning, we just need to keep growing. I don't feel like there's a finite beginning and ending of it. It's just something that we're going to continue to do. But we have some friends who have thought a lot about our questions and have come up with some answers, and also maybe some questions for us that they want to ask us. So I want to introduce our panel tonight. Andres Martin is from Ramona High School. He's a counselor at Ramona High School, so welcome, Andres. We have Dr. Laymon Hicks, and we owe Dr. Laymon Hicks big time because he's coming to us from Florida, where it is currently 10 o'clock at night. He is a CADA sponsor and speaker, and we are very grateful for his friendship and shared expertise. Monique Walton, soon to be Dr. Monique Walton, is currently the principal at Cesar Chavez Middle School, but next week she will be the principal at Mount Eden High School in Hayward, California. So welcome, Monique. James Layman is the NASSCED Executive Director for the state of Washington. And he's on our coast, but a little north of us, a little further north. And we are really grateful for him being here again tonight. And Rashaan Davis is also, I think you're in another time zone too, right, Rashaan?
Mountain time, yes.
Yeah, okay, so he is the NASSCED Executive Director for the state of Colorado. And get this, his job is the activities director for the state of Colorado. Who doesn't want that job? That's an impressive job. So welcome all of you. We're so glad you're here tonight. And the host of our panel tonight is going to be our Leadership Development Coordinator for CADA. She's also the NASSCED Executive Director for the state of California. So CADA's own Sandy Kurland. Take it away, Sandy.
Thanks, Allison. And thanks for hosting this tonight. Welcome, everyone. I am going to start off by hopefully getting to know the panel a little bit more. I know that as activity directors, when we get together and we do those like questions of like, what's your favorite ice cream? And those are like, what's the fun fact about you? All those are really rough, right? And I struggle to teach my students initiative, like how to take initiative. So for our panel, I'm just going to put out a question. Any one of you can answer, but there's only 5 questions and there's 5 of you. So Monique, if you wait till the last one, you don't know what it is, and that's the one you get. So, here you go. So Rashaan told us before we came on, it's really about building relationships more than anything else. So here's our relationship building for the 5 of them, so you can get to know them a little bit more prior to asking some really deep questions. So number 1 is, who's your favorite band or solo artist? Five questions, 5 people. So only one of you is going to answer this question. So if this is a question that speaks to you, you're going to answer that question, or else we could sit here awkwardly for the next 45 minutes.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and go, since you called me out. I'm going to go ahead and take this question, and I'll let them go with the rest. My favorite band was New Edition, BBD. And then we could take Ralph Tresvant, because, they all, Bobby Brown, just all of them. Why? Because I think when I really got into music, I was listening to Cool It Now and Count Me Out, and I was in love with Ronnie DeVoe, and that was my first concert at Great America. So, and it's always a party. And even now in my 40s, all these years later, when New Edition comes on, I'm definitely singing and dancing.
I feel like I've seen you DJ now that you answered that question, but have you DJ'd before?
Something I might have done that a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen you in some positions there. Thank you, Monique, for jumping in with initiative and answering that one. Okay, number 2 is, who is your hero and why? So now we're down to 4 people. If this one speaks to you, who's your hero and why?
I feel like the Jeopardy music needs to be played in the background for us. I'll go ahead and hit that one up. Cesar Chavez, I think for me always has been since high school, just because of the amount of work as a labor activist and a civil rights activist. I think the influence of peace and his ability to just influence others throughout the past 50, 60 plus years of maintaining that. I mean, he's passed away in the 90s, but maintaining that message of peace and how you operate and how I operate is doing things, through communication.
Great choice. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Yes. Next question is, what makes you laugh? What makes you laugh?
A lot of stuff. TikTok videos, my daughter. I think I laugh a lot, probably too much. I find humor in the most awkward things. So
I love the TikTok things. Like, it used to be like, let's Google YouTube videos on how to. Now it's like,
yeah, I literally on Instagram, I go on Instagram and just look at reels for like 45 minutes a day to kind of just decompress, and I just laugh.
Yeah, that tells us something about you, Layman. Thanks for answering that one. 4th question, so right down to 2. What do you wish you knew how to do that you can't do right now? What do you wish you knew how to do that you can't do right now?
Yeah, anything. When you've been in education your entire life and you're looking at retirement and you're like, what else am I good at? Does this translate to anything? I'd love to be able to work on my own car. I'd love to be able to, I mean, the list goes on, but it starts right there. When that engine light comes on and you're in the middle of nowhere, it's time to test prayer, because that's all I got. That's all I got.
Thanks, Rashaan. That made me laugh, so I can add that one to what makes you laugh, Rashaan does. Okay, so James, this is your question now, which I'm interested in your answer. When people come to ask you for help, what do they typically want help with?
Good pizza Netflix combinations. People ask me for a lot of advice on that. People ask me for the best time of the day to take naps, because I'm a big I love the couch nap. People ask me I think you're going to hear a lot more about things that people ask me advice on, like in this thing, but I am a relaxation specialist, is what I like to call it, which is a lot better than lazy. And so I'm a relaxation specialist, so people like to pick my brain on the best ways to make that happen in their lives.
Wow, so I just learned, I didn't know that there was a pizza / Netflix combo. I didn't know that certain things with certain pizzas. This is news to me, James, so I'll be asking you about it later.
I'll be writing a book.
So thanks for answering those questions. So for the activities directors out there, it's like a little bit more of a different way than to ask everyone the same fun fact, or to like put them on the spot, kind of like you can pick your question kind of thing, super fun. So thanks, Rashaan, for reminding me that it's about building relationships first. So we are all here tonight because we know we want to do better, right? That's the common theme we all have tonight, is that we know we want change, we know that we can do better, and we know that it starts with equity, which is a big piece of it. So I'm excited. Thanks for everyone for being here, and honored to be part of the conversation with you. So we are going to, if you want to ask a question, you can also drop it in the chat. I have some questions from the previous Jamboard or the social medias that were out there. So I will start with those. But if you're thinking of a question, because I was trying to think of this tonight when it's like a big, broad, like, what's your question about equity? Like, that's super scary and a lot. So I put it sort of into themes. So here's some themes that you can think about if you want to ask a question. And that I think relates to us as activity directors is, one is awareness. Like, how do you spread awareness, right? 2 is curriculum, which is funny because Andre, you talked about that before with the history books of, curriculum. 3 is obviously like activities that we do. I think 4 is like celebrations. We do a lot of that as activities directors. And something near and dear to my heart, student voice also. So it's just, as I was going through it, I was like, so if you have a question, I think that those are really kind of geared towards us. So anyone can answer these questions from the panel first, except for Monique, because she left us already. Apparently the asking the questions was really hard in the beginning here. So the first question from the Jamboard was, what should we change about our leadership program applications to be sure the process is equitable?
Okay.
So, go ahead.
I'll dive right in on this one because we just changed one of our application processes, and we went from 13 students last year to 44 students this year, right? And so first thing we did is we list every single accomplishment that you have done in your life by the time that you're 16. Like, stop that right now. Done. Doesn't matter. Second, we also got rid of what's your GPA. Third, instead of letters of recommendation, we switched the language to letters of support. Like, who supports you? And it didn't need to be a principal. Like, is there a coach? Is there another human being out there in your life that could support you in jumping into this? And it was a game changer. And then the questions we asked are just like, what is your vision for this? Like, what motivated you to be a part of this? Who do you represent? And so we completely flipped the script, as opposed to at 15 and a half years old, list every single accomplishment that you have ever done in your entire life. Because immediately people are going to self-opt out of that. Like, well, I want to join this, but I've never done this before. Oh, well, I have to have all these accolades. I'm out. By doing it this way, we rose to 44 applications, and it's been incredible. I mean, language is super important. We also, when I went through the application, I didn't write it. So when I say this, nobody judge me. But in the application, it said that we were looking for top-notch students. Like, that was written in the application, and I found it this year. And also a student called me out on an application this year about using the word articulate. They're like, I don't think you want to use the word articulate, James. I think what you mean is an effective communicator. Because if somebody's bilingual, trilingual, has a stutter, articulate's a nebulous word. They're like, I think you mean that they can effectively communicate in whatever that looks like. And so before we posted the application, I had students look at it and tell me all the things that were terrible. Secondly, we lifted all of these weird barriers that we feel like we need to find the best students. If we flip the script and we say that every student is already the best student, instead of we're looking for the best students, that they're already exceptional, and all we're trying to do is learn more about them. My man Rashaan, building relationships. Like, it's been a complete game changer for us here in Washington.
Wow, that's super exciting. I'm going to say that thanks, Rashaan, because I kind of got the question from you before when you said, like, look at the applications. But I just want to ask before someone else, James, what'd you change the GPA from and to? I'm just curious.
We just said that our expectation and hope is that if you are a part of this, that you are able to keep up with your schoolwork. That here's our time commitment, and that we hope that you are able to maintain whatever your GPA, whatever you feel is like. Because once again, like, why does a 3.0 mean that you're naturally a leader? We have a student who's like, James, I rose my GPA from a 1.7 to a 2.0, but because of this, they went and presented in front of our principals group this year and spilled all the tea to our principals this year, and were exceptional. And they said, I've never seen myself as a leader, but because you accepted me, because you said, what's the best GPA for me, versus me picking it, it was a complete game changer.
Rashaan, were you going to join in?
Yeah, one of the things, and I remember saying this last year, is we create systems to give us exactly what we want, right? And so you look at what people have created, and I'm with James, right? Like, all the things that we ever wanted, we narrowed it down so that we could have the top 6 or 7% of kids on campus. right? And for what? So, you know, I mean, one of the things that I would ask is your program about teaching leadership or producing activities, or both? But pick a lane, right? If you're about teaching leadership, then you should be taking kids who need leadership skills, right? If you're about producing events, you can get anybody, right? I mean, because all you're going to do is tell some kids to go here or there and do some things. You don't necessarily need all of those requirements in the application. But my thing is, let's take it back a step and let's look at who does what well, who plays school well. And it's usually white students, right? If you're taking some of our kids of color where they're at, you'll understand that they're not the first to raise their hand in your own classroom academically. So they're definitely not going to fill out a 5-question application that's asking them, as James says, you know, to tell you about their future. What does that even mean to some kids? Look, future is what's for dinner. And so how are we identifying kids, and how have we created a system that's going to give us what we want, which is diversity in our programming, diversity in our organization, you know, equity across the board, and opportunity for everyone? I think that's where you have to start.
And I'm gonna flip the script a little bit too. I'm gonna say, take the whole application out. Just take it out. Because when you think about it, even the fact of having an application, you're already limiting people, because the thoughts in our students' mind is that, especially our students of color, is, oh, I got to get so-and-so and so-and-so to give me a recommendation, or for them to even think that I can be a leader. And then I look at my SDC population when I was at Logan, those kids would never pass an application process. But they were the key in the access to including our special education population into our leadership program and our activities. You know, and so what I did, how I did is I would stand outside at lunch when we had all the parties going on, and I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, I need that person in leadership. Okay, this person is at all of our stuff. Okay, this person. And I would ask my leadership team, like, who's that? Who's that student? Have that student come see Miss Walton real quick. And I did. I took out the application, and I haven't had it in any of my of the schools that I've been in for that reason. I can't trust, and this is me saying, I can't trust teachers on any of the campuses that I have been on to actually give me a good impression of what a student is based on their actual ability, not on the perceptions of who they are because of how they show up and what they look like. And until we can shift that, then I can't. They're closed out of AP classes. They're closed out of GATE programs. When you look at how disproportionate it is of Black and Brown students being even recommended for GATE, which happens in the 3rd grade. So, like, when you're looking at that, then this is leadership, and in every aspect of everybody's life, no matter what status they have, they will need to be a leader in some capacity. So you want to join leadership, you want to be about this business, go ahead and sign up, and we'll make it happen. And so that was kind of how I would do it for some folks also.
There's a follow-up question, Monique, to yours, specifically in the chat, that says, how do you handle only a limited number of spaces in leadership?
Open up some sections. No, I'm just I had when I was in I had about 70 kids in one class, because you can't get over class. It was my 0 period leadership class. It was great. And then I had another class during the day. There were some places where I had 2 leadership classes. And when I was at Logan, I also had 2 leadership classes, and I had about 70 kids within those classes. So, I mean, if there's a need, and that's where you can look to your Title I budgets, your SIPSA budgets, you know, if we need to expand our leadership program so that we can be inclusive of our special ed population, our language learners, and all of our other special programs, if this is a way that we could pull them in, because school climate is a goal in your Title I SIPSAs, then we look at those ways to advocate for more sections. Or also you could do it as like a club. You can have, like some pieces be like a leadership club or something like that.
And I think kind of goes back to what Rashaan said earlier. You have to determine what your program is about. Are you looking to produce activities, or are you looking to produce leaders? And you have to convince your staff, your principal, whomever else, that this program that we are building in this room isn't just producing activities, but we're producing role models, we're producing leaders, we're producing people that are changing the climate of our school campus. Get them to see what is being done there, which would then allow them to open up more classes for higher enrollment.
Yeah, and I think you have to look at what leadership really is, right? Because I think we've created this pyramid where if kids don't get into our student government classes, they're not leaders, right? And so we really have to look at how we're diffusing leadership across the campus, and in what ways those kids can access some of the things that have traditionally been student leadership focused, right? Student council focused. There are groups who can help with homecoming activities. It doesn't always have to fall on your student government, student council group to produce that activity, right? And as we talk about equity, that's strike one right there, right? Is how are we making sure that our other leadership organizations on campus have a role to play in creating the biggest week, at least of the fall, for most campuses.
Yeah, I love that, because I was thinking of that earlier. It's like, how do you define leadership to begin with? Because when you ask for like great leaders, first of all, we probably don't even agree on what leadership means. And I think one of the struggles, which one of you just said, is like about the faculty, is that we always feel like our activities are on display, right, for everyone to see. And so therefore we want them to be perfect because it's a reflection of us. Getting the faculty to understand that this class is a learning process for others is, I think, a really big hurdle, which leads me to another question about the faculty, because I love this, because I feel like we again had this conversation before all of you joined on about like getting the faculty on board even before we move farther. But the question was, how should we encourage our colleagues who think we already have equity at school and we've checked off that box? How do we get them to understand to keep doing the work, that it's not, one and done kind of thing? Because I do feel like a lot of this, the kids are kind of come and go, but the faculty does tend to stay. And so I feel like that's a really big piece of this that we need to fix.
I think number one is we've used the word equity a lot here tonight, but I would say there's a lot of people who don't know what equity is. And I think the very first hurdle that we have to really focus on is we have to remember that language and vocabulary, there are inequities in that. And maybe I often, when I work with schools and people call me about equity related things and they tell me everything they do and they read me the laundry list of like, we've done this, and we've done this, and we've done this. And I'm like, well, how's it gone? Bad, right? And I'm always like, okay, does every single person in your building, from office staff to kitchen staff to educators to paraeducators, everybody, does everybody have a shared definition, a shared mental model of what equity even is? Because so many people don't, equity versus equality, right? Like equality is everybody gets shoes. Equity is everyone gets shoes that fits, right? But people don't know the difference between the two. So when people are like, no, we've done equity, they don't really, they don't know what they're talking about. They think they have an idea, but it's not been clearly defined. Because I often feel, and I try to be careful of it, but I feel like we can out equity ourselves out of the room by just dropping all the jargon and throwing all the words out there and forgetting that for many people, and I like to say people aren't late, they're right on time, like that this might be their first time really understanding, not just hearing the words, but understanding it in the context of what we do in schools, which is a huge paradigm shift of just knowing the definitions, but really how it fits in school. So I really think we've got to, I'm not saying go slow, but we have to be really intentional about the language that we use. And we can't just say we're doing equity and people are like, we're doing it, we're not doing it. That I think there's a giant disconnect with most people don't believe me, just read Facebook comment sections, right? There's a huge disconnect between like what people think it is and what it actually is. And so I think we have to start there.
Yeah, and for language, I just want to say, James, you were on a panel with the Castle students when we were doing something all together, and you said something to them that they repeat all the time, which is really interesting, which is like, because we're taught to say this is a safe space. And you said, no, it should be a brave space. And I thought that was really interesting because I hear people say that all the time. It's a safe space. And you're like, so we changed ours to say, oh, this is a brave space. So I think, again, your point about language and all that is.
And just for context for everybody, I hear the word safe space a lot. And where that comes from is like, we can never guarantee safety for any, like we just don't know what people come into the world with or come into situations with, what prior traumas people have. And so even with our best intentions, we can never guarantee emotional, physical, mental safety for anybody. And so like, I try never to promise that, but it's like, let's be brave and have grace. And safety could be a byproduct, but I never want to guarantee that just because I can't, because I don't know every person's full story. So that's really cool that they're repeating that.
Well, and in context, so thanks for clearing that, because we talk about that a lot. We get so, in my group in Castle, we get so where we can just get to the bottom line really quick and use those, and then we forget if other people are around that they have been on the journey with us. And so sometimes those little out of context sound very interesting. Well, I think one of the other things, and I think Jeremy, this kind of alludes to your question that you had asked on the social media post, is that, like, I'm assuming, of course, a lot of people here tonight are activities directors, right? And so one of our big priorities and things we do is put on activities. And we know that we have to, as Adam Grant would say, like rethink those, to take a look at what we do, kind of audit our habits. What are we doing? So the question is, what actions can we take to actively include others in our leadership opportunities, as well as like, how can we be sure the activities that we're putting on are really opportunities for everyone? I know it's a really big question, and especially if you're not an activities director, to know that specifically, like what activities are you doing on your campus that may not be the best, and I think we all know traditional things, are sort of interesting now, but I feel like maybe, Rashaan, you addressed it before when we were doing like, oh, Black History Month, and it's a certain month and those kinds of things. So anything that you can enlighten us on how we can do activities differently to make sure that we are being, the best we can be.
And I was even thinking things like prom. Do we have a prom that's off campus? Do we have a prom that they have to drive to? When we put a prom together, are we picking music that represents our student body, or are we picking music that specifically represents one group? And so, the whole act of putting an activity on can be a very upsetting, experience for our student body, instead of something that brings, joy and positivity. Like we've looked at all of our programs and realized sometimes we're doing more damage than good. So to kind of add context to the question, that's kind of, the direction I'm interested in is, how do we put on activities so all kids feel like they can be a part of it and feel seen, instead of just an activity that, oh, this is for this one group and this is actually hurtful.
Well, one of the things I've always shared when working with student activity groups is that you get into these positions, these leadership positions, these organizations, and then you produce events based on what you think is what the campus wants. Like, you don't have conversations with your constituents. And so my whole belief is that in order for people to become like your most satisfied constituents, you have to get out there and talk to them. So in this case, your leaders have to get out there and talk to their student body. What music do you want to see? What activities do you want to see? Like, don't just think that you know it all. Oh, okay, we're going to put this dance on, we're going to raise this, or we're going to do this event. That might not be what the campus wants. And so it's important to, during the lunch periods, I think I spoke at a school one time, they had purple shirts that had "Ask Me" on it. And the reason that they had this was because it would signify to people to come up and ask a question so they can engage in conversation. Look, there cannot be expectations without connection. And in order for your campus to evolve in any way, you have to connect with the people on the campus. Yeah, it's good to have people involved from all these various groups. But again, they only represent a small population of people. You have to talk to those out there to find out what it is that they want as well, in order to move your organization to a level where you feel like, you know what, we are tackling much more than what we have been doing in the past.
But to that point, you know, I think you have to have a campus that, to what James said earlier, understands what equity means, you know. And so when you do go to that event, you're not going to get 100% of what you want, and that's got to be a good thing, right? And so if we're going to play music, you know, that you know, represents a specific group on campus, it's not your favorite, it's their favorite, but we're going to get back to your favorite. So, you know, can you sustain life while we're not on your favorite? Or is this where you tell me how bad I am? So it goes back to that campus culture. What have you created that allows for kids to understand that at an event with 1,500 or 2,000 kids, you're not going to hear, you know, in my case, you're not going to hear Will Smith and Run DMC all night long. That would be a bad party. And I think kids have a hard time understanding what that looks like, and definitely how that might feel, right? Which is why we've created activities that have multiple things going on, right? We brought in the casino tables and we've got the dance floor, but we haven't taught kids to understand the why of that. We want everyone to find their place. We just said, hey, we're gonna have a whole bunch of stuff, right? And so I think there's a whole lot more education that can go into how we produce these activities.
Let me ask a follow-up question then, which is like, because I always say like take people on the journey, and I feel like what you just described, Rashaan, is like the leadership classes probably had tons of those conversations, right? Because they're like, oh, what DJ are we hiring? Like what music? It's all like, they're very invested in this and know the whole steps and the why of why they did everything. But the campus probably does not. Like, how would you suggest educating the masses on that?
Well, Sandy,
So
also,
again,
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Monique.
No, I was just gonna say also our students, we think that they like know all of it, but that's where I think us as leaders, we have to step in and we have to ask, because even though we think that our leaders know, they still have their clique, they still know what their friends want, and they know what has been traditionally happening. And so and they want to stick to that. So that's where we also have to come in as the leaders and not just say, okay, this is your prom. You've been, you know, in leadership for 3 years. You know how to run the senior prom. You just do it. Like, we have to, our influence of how we keep things inclusive. I think we need to always have that voice in there, because our teenagers are teenagers. No matter how great of a leader they are, they still want to work around and find a way to get underneath and overtop something to get it done fast. A couple other things, it'd be like somebody put in the chat about dress up days. Like, that is one way that we can really look at. And I'll never forget this time we did a battle of the sexes, and then it changed immediately to this or that, because I had some students come up and say, like, this is offensive. So really shifting how, instead of like Barbies or GI Joe, you know, it's this, it's like a this or that type thing, and always give options, and I always give colors. So you can wear, you know, it could be a wacky hat day or wear blue. It could be such and such or wear this. So really kind of just being a little more creative with our dress up days. And then I'm gonna hit back on our students living with disabilities, and really including them in creating, like, we created an ASB office, and we called it the Outreach Commissioner. And that office would be for students from our SPED population. And it was their role. And I had SDC kiddos in my class as part of our leadership class. And their role was really to spread the information of activities to welcome our whole population. And then what we did also one year was, and this happened by a teacher coming up to us, we started having winter ball. That was at the winter ball, we would crown king and queen, or we should probably change that too. We should change royalty also, now that we're talking about it. But it would be students from our special ed population. Like, they were the ones for winter ball. And that came from a teacher request and our ASB officers that year, like, this is something that we should do. And I think it lasted for about 5 to 6 years. And I stay focusing on that because they're a large population of our school in some schools. And they are the silence, the forgotten, the we don't see you. And they are the biggest supporters of leadership and activities, and will be some of the most loyal leaders in your class, and will teach your students, like the other students, what it means to really build those relationships that we've been talking so much, because you have to put your guard down and your fears down to really get to know them in many ways. So just a few things, but we can't lose sight of us being the leader and still being the teacher, and having to teach our students how to really do this, because they're learning as well. Go ahead, Andreas, you hit us up with something.
I was just going to add that as a counselor, when we do registration every year, we always go down to the middle school and we always bring our student leaders there, from whether it's ROTC, whether it's our band kids, our ag kids, our ASB kids, going down there, spreading the news. Hey, it's not just, these kids, it's our athletics, everybody. That way we get that engagement going on, and engagement and building those positive relationships. I think that's part of one of the things from the counseling department, what we've done to help that school culture build on itself to be positive and proactive as much as we try.
Yeah. That's so interesting too, that you brought that up, Monique, because with Castle Our Service Project this year, which we do every year, and the students choose what they want. And they chose an organization called the Touch of Understanding, which teaches about disabilities. And, as educated as we thought we were, when they went through everything with us, we're like, oh, put closed captionings on things. Like, that's what we thought, and they taught us so much about how to look at things differently on your campus through their lens. And it was so educational for everybody. And it's just funny because we, again, kind of what you guys have said all along, is that we assume a lot of things and forget to, sort of really point those out. So that was just a really enlightening one for us at Castle, which we get, incredible leaders from all across California, right? And collectively, we were really enlightened together. And we were like, wow, if we are, then, I'm sure all the campuses are as well. So thanks for bringing that up. Anyone want to put a question in the chat before we go on to address all of you before I look at the Jamboard? Allison, do you want to check the Jamboard again and see if there's additional ones on there before I move on? But anyone else here, like Jeremy just unmuted and, threw out his question. So again, anyone else you could even unmute if you want to ask a question before I move on, or type it in the chat and I'll give you a few moments, and think back maybe to the theme questions of something about awareness, something about curriculum, celebration, student voice. That's again, a big one for me, maybe what we could do in that area.
I'll throw, just why somebody's going to ask a question. My new friend Monique threw out great stuff about homecoming. In Washington right now, we have this big movement about random royalty, where on the first day of the week, just 32 random names just 32 random names are pulled out. And then the next day, a principal throws ping pong balls and a cup. It's good, folks, right? And then those 16 names, they move on to the next round, and it's completely random. And instead of calling it homecoming royalty, it's homecoming heroes. And at the end of the week, it's just, here are the 4 people or whatever. I forget how many they boil it down to. Sometimes it's 8. It's not voted on. It's not popularity contest. One year it was 8 freshmen. One year it was somebody who moved to the school the week before and they became a homecoming hero. But it becomes this really fun thing, and it takes the voting out of it. They don't even call it royalty. It's just, here's our homecoming heroes. And they've kept the heroes part for all of, here's our prom heroes, right? And what they've just done, everything random versus voting, and it's completely shifted the culture. It's going to be anybody, right? And at the assembly on Friday, they just pull out the 8. I think they get down to 8, and it's just, here are the 8. Here's your homecoming heroes for this year. It's completely random, and so Monique just mentioned the homecoming thing, so I'll throw that out. But that craze is sweeping Washington right now.
And I feel like homecoming just gets us in all sorts of trouble. It's the spirit days, which are really culturally inappropriate these days. It's the royalty. There's just so many. I think it goes back to Jeremy's questions of like, what activities are we putting on that are more harmful than good? Or, I feel like it's really hard for people to look at something through a different lens when it's tradition. There's just very like, we've always done it this way, and it's just comfortable. Like you don't really even think about it. And in the book that we just read, I remember when she was talking about race specifically, she just said, we like our race a little more like, not so in your face. It's like there's these little subtle things people do that they don't think about, where you all think about like the really big things that no one should be saying or doing. And when she wrote the book, she's like, I'm not writing it for them because we know that those people are probably not going to change, but we're looking at the small little things, the very subtle, kind of like the language, James, that you talked about, the very subtle little things you do that you don't understand are really hurtful. And I thought that was so interesting. So.
And I think when you think about tradition, and this is just how kind of like I look at things, because it's huge in the activities world. This is our traditional activity. But think about all of the things that we are trying to fight against now that have been tradition, that we just want to just let go or, keep going because it's tradition and this is how it's been done. And we keep having these movements of pushing back, but it's tradition. So I think that a conversation that you have when we are discussing traditional activities is, let's look at all these things that are tradition that need to be shifted. And this could be one of them.
Yeah.
Andy, Lynn brought up, she wanted to know more about the microaggressions with dress up days. And I know we talked about that a lot last week in our book club. And a lot of us had big aha moments with that. So if we could address that. And then also, Monique, when you just said that, it made me think, a lot of the traditions aren't traditions to the kids, they're traditions to the parents. So what wisdom do you have to help us educate parents that this is not really what our kids want now? So both of those questions with you.
We'll go back to Lens because we did talk a lot about this at our book club thing about microaggressions and dress up days, because I feel like it just feels like those are a lot of trouble along the way. Even one of my students who's from Hawaii, and I really hadn't thought about this, and she's like, we did Tacky Tourist Day, which is like super traditional. I feel like you feel like it's going to be fine. And she's like, my family's from Hawaii. We feel like they're just making fun of us wearing their Hawaiian shirts and lays and cameras. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting.
One of the things that's really important in this conversation is that the focus stays on what that equity looks like, right? Like in our school district, we always make it a point to stay on race, right? I mean, we have to, like, what is our equity focus? What's our lens on? It's on race. It's on how we're educating, how we're, the activities we're planning for our kids of color. And it has to be there because I think there you can see everything else, right? Some would say, but I mean, it's interesting, Lynn, the things that we think are really cool. Again, it's that top 10% of socially well-balanced kids in student leadership who sit around and just toss out things they saw on TV or think would be really cool. And they go over like a fart in church, right? USA Day, right? When we have America Pride Day, what's that going to look like moving forward? Right now we're battling with the pledge in schools. And then here comes our leaders saying, let's do a USA Day, right? Microaggression immediately, because it's such a polarizing topic anymore, right? Hip Hop Day. I mean, where do you begin to go? I mean, I don't want us to have to go to the other end where we're doing things like, just wear a color, right? But we do have to really put some thought into not who this offends, but why are we doing this, right? What's the come up on this? What's the good thing about this? What really is prideful about this on our campus? And yeah, you're right. I think at some schools, parents would be the first to say, this isn't the way we do that. This has never been the way our school rolls, right? And they're saying that in their letter jacket, probably, right? Class of 67. And so I think there's a whole lot of education that has to happen, and it has to be ongoing. Layman talks a whole lot about how, man, I feel like I should call everybody Dr. Somebody on this panel. I'm sorry, y'all. But Layman talks a whole lot about, like how are people set up to take in all of this? And we have to do a better job of from the start of the school year, laying out who we are before we lay out what we do, right? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing with the parents. Like we have to educate them as well. Yes, they're coming in with their Letterman jacket and wanting to, keep this tradition going. But we're in a different time. And if we don't provide that pushback, knowing that, everybody knows that when you begin to push these issues of race and these issues of equity and inclusion, and to some people, it feels as if that is taking away their own liberty, their own freedom, then or what they're used to, then it's going to be uncomfortable. Those conversations are going to be uncomfortable. We're gonna have to have brave spaces to have these conversations and push forward what we know is best for our students. And I don't care if you only have 5% of African American students on your campus. I don't care if more than half of your population are white students or one particular race or another. At some point in time, just as we are sitting here working with each other, they will go out into the world and they will have to co-mingle and be and work with people who of various races, cultures, and you name it. So it is our job to mold that. And if they happen to be in our leadership programs, then we have to mold that and we have to push those conversations. And so that goes back to that Title I in your SIPSIS. If you're in there, maybe there's some piece because you do need to have parent conferences. No, I'm not writing my SIPSIS right now, not at all. But you do have to have parent engagement opportunities, and maybe some of that money is going towards how do we engage in a equitable, inclusive conversations with our school community, because our parents are also our stakeholders, and they are going to push back. But we have to push back more because they know what's going on in their house and within their community. We know what's going on in our house of schools and then in the various houses that are within our school community. And so as the leaders, we have to be the ones to push that.
And when are you having those parent teacher conferences, like during the day when all the working parents can't come? It's always the big question now of like when you put on these parent conferences and who can and who can't. Yeah.
As a principal, well, Zoom is amazing now. Everybody can attend no matter what, and it could be recorded. We've learned that. But I also, as a principal, I have my meetings in English and in Spanish, and I have a set in the morning and I have a set in the evening. So there's no excuses as to if you can make it or not. But like those are times. We also do things on Saturdays. That's what brings in a lot of parents also. But yeah, and then like I said with Zoom now, they can hop on at work if they need to.
Monique, I think that's a great point with parent and engagement with the parents. How do we celebrate our student voices? How do we celebrate those voices to communicate from the school to the parents, whether it's through an email or a quick phone call? Hey, so-and-so did well on this project or what have you. I think that those are very important aspects. My challenge or my ask to each and every single one of you is, how do other teachers go out there and share that with their parents? 5 phone calls a day, simple. Hey, little Johnny did this, or little Maria, whatever the case may be. That's just my 2 cents for right now.
Well, and even the tradition thing, I was thinking when someone talked about that, like as a high school teacher, I feel like our seniors are like, this is tradition, which is funny because you'll have freshmen coming up, right, saying something, and the seniors feel like they've been there for 4 years and it's their right to continue to do some of the things that we probably shouldn't have been doing when they were freshmen anyway, right? And they're like, oh, we want to continue these traditions because there are traditions. It's like, wow. So sometimes it moves so quickly that it's not even the parents there, it's the seniors that have been through those procedures too. So, yeah. So
Rashaan mentioned it's important to ask what it feels like to be a student of color on your campus. And I think, again, I'm just going to go back to the point of it's also important to ask the students of color on your campus what it feels like. We do not do enough asking of questions of everyone. We assume. And so these students don't have to be in your leadership organization to have a conversation with them, to build a connection with them. What are you feeling? What do you think? And going back to what he said earlier about, our teenagers today just really need to understand, okay, we're not just going to play Will Smith all the time, but we also have to set a precedent where we're not letting them down. Okay, so we're not going to play Will Smith all the time, but give them some bit of hope that you are going to do something that is beneficial for them. Some activity. Let them see, you know what? We do hear you. We are trying, and we are, we're creating activities that are inclusive for everybody. So again, it's so important to have the conversations with your populations on campus, regardless of who's involved in the organization, whether that's you as the leader, as your, as the ASB director, talking to different students passing by, whether that's you putting your leaders out there, having those conversations with people. You have to be able to connect with those different segments on your campus to understand what they are feeling, what they are seeing, what they are experiencing. And then you can take that and create activities around those things.
Yeah, the number of people who, after you have conversations, say, I never thought of it that way, is really interesting. You're like, oh. So we had a lot of conversation about this before we all got on, and I had asked the panelists not to prepare anything, but I wanted them to leave us with an ask. So I love the Maya Angelou quote so much, like, you do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, you do better. So like, we want to know better and we want to do better. So leave us with your ask, and realize that our audience are people who have platforms, right? Everyone on here probably is involved in student activities as an activities director, as teacher, as a class advisor, or principals, hopefully even, right? So we have a platform and we're on our campus. Like, what is your ask of all of us to make our campus better and more equitable?
So I'm going to write a book. Y'all, I'm announcing it now. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it will. And so if anyone steals this title, was born right here. But it's going to be, it's literally going to be called, Have You Asked Your Students Yet? And so here's my challenge for adults. I've started telling this to advisors when they call me. This year was a lot of, hey, what ideas have you heard to celebrate our seniors? And I said, before you call me, you have 600 seniors at your school. Have you asked your students yet? And not just your leadership students, have you asked your students yet, right? Hey, whenever anybody calls me and asks for, hey, I'm looking for ideas on blah, 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 blah. Before I'm like, I will talk with you after you go have a conversation with your students. And then we will talk. And before you call another advisor, before you call another principal, I dare you, I double dog dare you to go ask your students first and foremost. So it's going to be a book, Have You Asked Your Students Yet? By James, and page 1 is just going to be, Have You Asked Your Students Yet? Page 2 is just going to be the same thing, and all the way up to page 500. But literally, like, I think so often we feel like we need to go to adults, we need to, and here we are on a Zoom listening to adults talk. But I think the epicenter of change is going to start when we actually listen to what our students have to say, and not just our leadership students, not just our student council students, but we actually make the effort to go ask our students of color, our students with special needs, right? Our neurodivergent students, right? All of our other students in our schools, until we go and actually ask them, right? And we're prepared for that feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. Oh, your assemblies suck. Okay, our assemblies aren't good. What would you like to see in our assemblies? Okay, now we're empowering, right? And now we've flipped it. What would you like to see? I don't know. Well, think about it. Like, you tell me, what would you like to see in our assemblies? And maybe we can make that happen. Now we're empowering, we're asking, and I think the epicenter of change is going to start as soon as we value that. So, Have You Asked Your Students Yet? By James S. Layman, coming to bookstores sometime in the next decade.
I'm pre-ordering it on Amazon right now, and it's not even a thing, so it's great.
I guess I got a co-ownership in that, because I'm Layman too. So.
What is your ask for us, Layman?
For me, I think it's just remembering that I'm going to ask all of you to remember that you are in a fishbowl, that everything that you do, what you say, how you act, how you carry yourself, people are always watching, especially your students. And I just believe that many of us are not as aware of how our action and inaction drives people away or to us. And so as you go back to school this year, I want you to be mindful of that. I'm asking you to be more mindful of that as we continue to have these dialogues around what is equity, equality and equitable treatment of all, being respectful of each other, like all of these things. Just be mindful of that, that you are in a fishbowl and people, your students are watching you, and what you do, they'll do.
Yes, somebody just said that about like whatever you're doing in class, like if you say something, poorly and students see you doing that, what they've learned from you is you can treat certain people more poorly than others. Because even if, you were just doing it quickly, like they saw that and that's what they remember from it. Is that Monique, what's your ask from us?
My ask is that you be brave. And I ask that, before we celebrate Juneteenth becoming a national, a federal holiday, that if we don't have it in our hearts to teach why Juneteenth is a national holiday or it became a federal holiday so quickly, and why, Black history, if we can't talk about why Black History Month is important and teach it, then you got some work to do. So be brave in those spaces. Be brave and push back. When you are having these conversations about, no, we shouldn't be teaching critical race theory. No, we shouldn't be teaching ethnic studies. No, we shouldn't. Why are we having these conversations about making our activities equitable if we don't feel that we need to really be teaching our students about why we have these dates and why we do these things? And also be brave and expand your ideas of who we are showing to our students, our actual leaders of leadership. Expand that beyond just the political realm. Let's look at our athletes. Let's look at our musicians. Let's look at our artists. Let's look at all of the ways in which we are excelling and being leaders in different areas, and bring those people, bring those faces in, because we only hear the most popular ones. But just expand and be brave with this, because you can't read all these books, you can't do all of these things, and I think somebody in here, we said it. I'm tired of going through this. I'm tired of being a leader of a school where I'm not respected because of how I look and what I represent. So we're tired. So understand that. And when you look at each one of your students or your colleagues, and you go to ask that question, understand that we're tired. And we need you to act. We need you to do. We need you to be. We need you to keep it relevant, engaging, authentic, and loving. We need you to keep it real. I'm calling that out too. Just like James, he writing that book. I'm gonna write that keeping it real book also. So y'all heard it here first in about a decade or so. But honestly, y'all, come from the heart and be real. Value, respect, love Black children, Black people, your colleagues. I know I'm keeping it strictly with Black folks, but what I've learned is if you get it right with the Black folks, everybody benefits in your change behavior. So that's my ask.
Andres, I feel like you kind of asked your ask in the beginning, but would you want to end with one?
I think teaching resiliency. I think for me, resiliency, and I may have said this before in the past, but being able to teach your students how to keep humor in life, how to build those positive relationships, how to, keep a moral compass of knowing what's the right thing to do, whether it's bold, and to empower those around you. Be brave, as I think the theme has been here, because it's going to take a lot of brave boldness to get things done, no matter if you're not the popular person or not. Reminding ourselves of insight, being aware of who we are or what other people bring to the table, keeping that vision alive and maintaining that vision. Initiative, of course, I think is going to be very key to this. And lastly for me is building those positive relationships that we've talked about throughout the evening, of engaging and building those positive relationships with those, not just the students of color, but parents and every stakeholder at the table. I think the next fold would be, for me, is the ask of keep on sending those teachers who are burnt out, hey, we got this. Have those students go back again to your leaders, go to those teachers or to all teachers, not just the burnout ones, but to maintain that light under our fire, or the fire under our feet, rather. So
Time to help each other. Rashaan, last ask of us.
Man, you guys are heavy, man. I was just gonna ask for like a free copy of the book, or Okay, so I had some thoughts, and my first thought is always going back to my high school days and what did I need? What did 16-year-old Rashaan Davis need in high school? And I needed connection. I needed to feel like I belonged. I needed teachers who cared for real. I needed stuff, and those are the things that I try to create for kids now. Not my needs, but definitely to put our leadership students in a position to ask the question and create the opportunity for other kids. And so, if you think about where you were at 16, what did you need? And how do you see how that's changed? And we can fill the bucket of kids today. So that's huge for me. But we've had a lot of time off over the last few months. And so my question, or my ask, is what's new and different? Like what really changed? Or did you just, we took a mask off and we're back to level one, and so activities are, what I mean? Will you have something, even that just small little tweak or twist in something new and different? So that's part of it. But two, I would say, are you challenging the paradigm? Like things have been in place forever, as we've said. And so how are you empowering kids to challenge the paradigm? And three, who are you willing to make uncomfortable? Who are you really willing to make uncomfortable as we move forward? The parents who've always had it that way, the administrators who want it quick and easy and back to class. Who are you really willing and ready to make uncomfortable? And we know that conversations around race are always uncomfortable. And so I encourage you to continue to have those. And, I don't think uncomfortable has to be this negative thing. It just has to be a thing. Because I think that's where we would tell students that we grow, right, from when we're uncomfortable. So there's that. And then the last thing I would say is I would ask that you create real, meaningful leadership opportunities for kids. These are kids who have stood out in the street and protested. They have seen police brutality in their neighborhoods, maybe. They have done the work, right? And then they come to school and we kind of harness some of that energy. And so I would say that, it has to be our job to really allow kids to be in this moment, in this time period, real leaders. And so whether that's you connecting them with conversations with staff about programming or curriculum or whatever's happening on campus or the community, we really have to create more than just the assembly or election time as an opportunity for kids to lead. Let's give them opportunities. Let's create real, meaningful leadership opportunity.
I know I heard the other day that they said, you know, what creates real change? And they were like, things that can create real change are like a pandemic, an economic downturn, a social movement. Wow, we've had all of these. So you would think if we ever had a shot at it, like the trifecta of all of them might just be there. And when you were talking about who are you going to make uncomfortable, Rashaan, I was thinking to myself, including yourself. You know, it's not always comfortable for any of us, to be honest. Like, it is just the braveness of you being willing to do it. So to everyone who came here tonight, I know that the conversations are not always comfortable. And I know that, you know, it's 8 o'clock on a Monday night and you've been through a lot. So just so grateful for the fact that you would tune in tonight to want to commit to, you know, creating a better campus and doing really tough things like equity, like that. These are not, oh, thanks, Len. It's after 11 here. You get a gold star, Len. You're really good. But yeah, it is. It's just it's work. It's, you know, no way you look at it, it's work. Like when you said, oh, these are deep ones. Like, can we create light ones? But the idea is that, you know, real change it's slow. It's a lot of work. It's taking people on the journey. You know, none of this which says like, let's just have a great big party. You know? So thank you to the panel who, like you said, kind of tired of talking and really hoping that tonight was able to produce some, you know, what happens next moments. We've all been challenged with 5 amazing things. I hope everyone wrote those down and check yourself next year as like, how are you doing? Check off these asks once again. And to all of you who again showed up tonight, thank you for showing up. Thank you for stepping up. Thank you for wanting to make your campus, you know, the best possible through leadership, which we know is, you know, again, how you define it. So really looking at things through a different lens. So Allison, I'm passing it back to you.
Sandy, the other thing I was going to say, and I hope the panelists will agree with me, but in the book that we read last month, well, we just did our book club last week, Ijoma says it's going to be messy work and you're going to make mistakes and you can't be afraid to make mistakes, because if you are, then you're not really doing the work. So if anyone hasn't read this book, it was really enlightening to me. I really, really enjoyed it. It was So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijoma Oluo. I hope I pronounced her name right. Excellent book. We're carrying on this equity conversation all summer. So we have a book club that we've created and we're constantly searching for good sources of information. The book that we are going to discuss on July 21st is She, He, They, Me for the Sisters, Misters, and Binary Resistors. Oh, and Ron's got that up on the screen. Thank you, Ron. So if you're interested, the book is available on Amazon. We're really excited about it and really excited about continuing to look at different people's needs and just develop an understanding and continue to grow as educators ourselves. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, that the book for August is going to be The Leader's Guide to Unconscious Bias. So, you know, last year we had the movement sparked, and I'm really encouraged that 27 people tonight fought the "it's summer vacation, I don't want to do anything," and joined us tonight to have this important discussion. And thank you so much to our panelists for continuing to just join in this conversation with us. And it is exhausting, I'm sure, but what the insight you shared is just so personal and so important to each of us. I couldn't believe it when the hour was over. I was like, what? Wait, where'd the hour go? So thank you again to all of you. Thank you to Sandy for leading us and preparing for tonight, and to everybody who contributed questions. Really, really exciting stuff happening, and just grateful to all of you. So with that said,
and Allison, let me just say real quick, you know, we say we're exhausted, but we're never going to stop having the conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And so I definitely want, you know, it's not like, oh, I don't want to ask, I don't want to say anything. We definitely want you to ask, you know, and continue, but we definitely want that work to be done also. So we're not continuing to ask, but hey, like, I just want you guys to know that it's not like don't ask, do my own homework, because you still need to know our experience. But no, when we keep recycling these conversations and these PDs, that's the piece that becomes exhausting.
Well, and in Ijoma's book, one of the points that she made was, it's not my responsibility to educate you. And yet we still keep going to our same friends. I felt a little bit guilty going to my same friends saying, I trust you so much that I really want to ask you these questions because I know you'll be real with me. And I know you will share with me what I need to hear. And I'm just so grateful to each of you for being, I have pages of notes already from tonight.
That's why I said that. That's why I said it, Allison, because I knew he was like, I feel guilty. No, it's not. We don't want you to feel guilty. We want you to reach out.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for being here tonight. And I hope you have an excellent summer vacation. Hopefully you'll join us in our book club conversations. Anybody here is welcome to join. It's open to everybody. And have a great night.